Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our fourth in our series of webinars on supply chain risk and resiliency, our prescriptive online 90-day action plan tool. And today we will be focusing on operational propensity. Again, welcome for joining us. My name is Jim Vries, founder and president of Enhance International Group. I will be the host for today's webinar. We also have with us from Uphaven, Claire and Cindy Lee. They'll be helping us out and helping you with your questions, and we'll be taking your questions throughout the webinar. Joining me is Greg Schlegel. He will be joining me here on the on this webinar. He has a vast experience. Greg is one of the original founders of Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency and former president of Apex ACM. Greg founded the consortium in 2010, and Greg is a celebrated speaker and an esteemed author of the book Supply Chain Risk Management and Emerging Discipline, published in 2015. Greg, a few words of introduction.
Thanks, Jim. Great to be here with you today to talk about our passion. As Jim said, we've been in this business for about 12 years now. I've taught this body of knowledge at Lehigh University over the last 10 years. Also teach at Villanova, Enterprise Risk Management. I did spend 8 years with IBM as a supply chain executive consultant and practice lead. Been a 30-year supply chain practitioner with a host of different Fortune 100 companies, taught at about 6 different universities. And this is our passion, and we look forward to a terrific dialogue today with you.
Thanks, Greg. And again, please be ready to answer the polls as well as participate in Q&A at any time throughout the webinar. And we do have this webinar series stored on consultingeig.com website. So at the conclusion of this webinar this weekend, you'll see it posted there. We'll send a mailer out on that. So with that, let's get started. So again, this is the fourth webinar on operational propensity. How do you operate? Our fifth webinar will be your tailored game plan. That comes on March 22nd. And our last webinar in the series is promoting your company, which comes in on April 5th. The first 3 webinars are available on the consultingeig.com website. And if you would like to get more information, feel free to contact us at any time. Greg, a few words?
You bet. We'll just get you grounded about the consortium. It's grown to 32 companies at the moment. That's about 1,700 supply chain risk professionals around the globe. These companies bring, as you can see, tools, techniques, methodologies, and software solutions to help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks. Over on the left, what do we provide? Online education. We have 2 courses that are very well attended at the moment in terms of supply chain risk and resiliency. They're self-paced. We do virtual training like this. We have done and do classroom training face-to-face. We used to do about 20-some face-to-face workshops around the globe with our partners prior to the pandemic. We provide certificates and certifications in this space. We help companies with risk awareness and mitigation. We bring supply chain risk and resiliency best practices from our book. We coach companies on their journey. We've built supply chain war rooms for organizations. We bring software as a service and enterprise software risk platform solutions, as you can see. And we're talking about this online course today, which is the 90-day prescriptive action plan. We also now have another online assessment for supply chain readiness that we'll be talking about in the next couple of months. So that's essentially who we are and what we do. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks. Thanks, Greg. And just a little bit of background on myself. I work, very closely with Greg on the 90-day action plan and the readiness. But I also run Enhanced International Group, which is an exchange of passionate experts to guide your transformations to provide self-generating and self-funding results. We have about 50 consulting companies, and SaaS providers that provide thought leadership focused on enabling your enterprise. EIG serves as that master integrator to provide you access to the best and brightest companies. We're like a Swiss Army knife, you could say. Our team is dedicated to empowering the organization's workforce by leveraging EIG's partners' tenured thought leadership expertise. Our goal is to meet and exceed your expectations and customize predictable, sustainable, and repeatable 90-day action plans that are self-funding. If we look at this bicycle slide that we developed as a team, it was introduced a number of years ago, and it was modeled for a company's ecosystems within these two wheels, linking strategy to execution. The two geared wheels are connected through a chain from strategy through tactics to execution. On the left iron wheel, there are two geared wheels are inexplicably linked, of course, through this chain, and otherwise we will become derailed if the chain if we're not moving in sync. And so we're inexplicably linked. We focus on developing an agile supply chain and resiliency mindset to ensure that we're successful in our overall journey together. Since the front wheel strategy moves at a slower rotation than the rear wheel execution, the solid strategy will result in many execution cycles. In summary, a strong linked strategy to execution ecosystem results in positive momentum for the company, your company, its employees, customers, suppliers, and shareholders. Quoting from Albert Einstein, life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you got to keep moving. So let's get moving with this webinar. Our agenda is defining the supply chain risk management and W-like recovery. Greg will kick us off there. Then we'll get into operational propensity overview, definitions, tactics, and a case study. And then we'll talk about recap on the 90-day action plan and the benefits of indoctrinating a supply chain risk management program. Greg?
You bet. We want to talk about, we want to give you some definitions quick, and then we'll get into what we call the W-like recovery. So very quickly on the next slide, we give you a sense of some definitions from our perspective. So what is enterprise resiliency? We're just trying to get you grounded. This comes out of our book, Doing Well. Came out in 2015. Our definition that we like about a resilient enterprise is a resilient enterprise has the capacity to overcome disruptions and continually transform itself to meet the changing needs and expectations of its customers, shareholders, and other stakeholders. We'll be truthful with you. That's a tall order, folks, very tall order. But we see this definition as, why would anyone spend any time on supply chain risk and resiliency? This is why. The what and the how come from our definition of supply chain risk management, all right? And our definition of the what and the how are essentially, it's the implementation of strategies to manage everyday and exceptional risks along your entire supply chain through continuous risk assessment with the objective of what? to reduce your business's vulnerability and ensure continuity. One way to view SCRM is to think of it as the intersection between good supply chain management performance and pure risk management. So the next slide, we have some latest and greatest data from the street. This is called the buzz. All right, it comes to us via Supply Chain Brain magazine, which is a good friend, a longtime friend of the consortium. The actual survey was done by Alex Partners through Bloomberg as well. And we thought this was pretty compelling as of 2022. Here's the quote coming from the report. The C-suite is a bundle of nerves this winter. A new survey by these folks shows that 72% of the CEOs are worried about losing their jobs in 2022 because of business disruptions, tracking closely with the 94% of the bosses who say their corporate models need to be overhauled, excuse me, within the next 3 years. And so essentially, what we wanted to do was show you on the right-hand side of the slide that coming from this report, the C-suite's top concerns include supply chains, labor, and cybersecurity. Not surprisingly, but the majority of the CEOs are very, very concerned about their broken supply chains. Again, another impetus behind why one would spend time in this area. So we addressed this issue way back in May of 2020, and we called it the W-like recovery. So we want to share this with you. We've exposed this in all of our existing webinar series, so you may have seen this before if you've attended previous webinars from us. But we call this the W-like recovery, or the 3 R's. This picture to us going forward is a continuum from left to right, and we, as we said, we put this together for our clients and workshop attendees back in May of 2020. So on the top of the slide from left to right are the government mandates in blue. You can see them: lockdowns, reopen, another lockdown, first new normal, second, and so forth. On the y-axis on the left, essentially, is our segmentation of the global supply and demand arena. What do we mean by that? Well, on the top left, we have the over demand for product and the undersupply dilemma. In the middle, the green, we basically have our baseline, which is supply and demand in relative balance. And on the bottom left, we have the under demand for the product and the oversupply dilemma. And then on the x-axis on the bottom, we have essentially our perspectives on this wave, if you will, the W-like recovery, and we call them the 3 R's: respond, recover, and renew. We'll give you a quick thumbnail sketch of each. As you can see, we recognize the bullwhip effect would be prevalent for some time into the future. We just didn't know how long the tail would be. In the respond phase, companies were reducing their product portfolios. They were attempting to keep up volume to support their good customers, and they were rescaling in this phase their supply chains. In recovery mode, companies continued to reduce their product portfolios. They attempted to reinvent their product lines, and they were going after new channels. And now on the right-hand side in renew, where many companies are today, based on our sentiment surveys and webinars, the bullwhip effect has diminished to a certain degree, and companies are still attempting to ramp up to the new demand. All right, it's still a very difficult supply chain situation, folks. We cannot tell a lie. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. So the next section we have is what drove us to launch this tool and develop this tool a number of years ago when at the onset of the pandemic. So some of the things that drove us, the impetus to drive the tool, first, of course, was the pandemic. The second, of course, was a McKinsey report on why investing in supply chain resiliency pays off. And you could see just from this last article from Supply Chain Brain, it's just more, it's getting more and more louder, so to speak, with folks wanting to deal with this proactively. And of course, for us, it's that inability to sit down with companies to lead, guide, direct, and coach in the hallways. It's even today, we are still limited in our travel, although travel has increased dramatically in the last few months. And then the last one is we as far as we're concerned, there's a staggering and uneven negative impact of the pandemic on manufacturers due to artificial demand and supply chain shocks. So as Greg just discussed, in the bullwhip effect, we're seeing it on both ends. It's not like we're seeing it only on the demand side, we're seeing it on both ends. And it's getting a little squirrely out there, as some people would say professionally. And it's only going to get worse. And we're going to be seeing a lot of volatility over this next year. But we're probably at the height of the volatility, hopefully, but we'll see. Surprises keep coming. So let's a little background on the 90-day action plan. You know, it is a 90-day action plan. It's based on an online survey of about 100 questions. We're talking from a survey perspective and understanding and onboarding, you're talking about 7 hours, and then we will provide another 40 hours of coaching on the way that you would like that coaching to be as part of this package. We assess where are you, which was webinar 2 of our series. Who are you, which was our last webinar, and then how do you operate is today's webinar. And then the last 2 webinars are focused on how to get this going in your company and the 90-day action plan. So for the survey itself, we have an onboarding call, which is about an hour. We ask at least 5 to 8 stakeholders to complete this survey across your company. And it should be across your company, not just in what you may call supply chain today. It's finance, it's sales, it's your end-to-end part of your organization that's going to be affected by these this bullwhip effect, as we discussed. So we're covering it end-to-end, and then we're going to have that meeting with aligned to the 90-day action plan report that we provide to you. We'll give you the 5 to 8 actions, and then we will provide coaching with 40 hours of coaching. In the first confirmation call, we'll decide where do you want your coaching, how do you want it to be structured, and then we'll have these check-ins on a monthly basis to make sure that we're aligned to your expectations all the way through the 90 days. So that's a bit about the program. And then let's get right into operational propensity, a deep dive here. So operational propensity is focused on two areas here that we break it down into the heartbeats and personas. So we're going to start with the heartbeats here. And overall, we have these. The heartbeats represent on the x-axis, or on all the axes, and the personas are the different quadrants, as you see. So that's how it's laid out. And there's internal focus is on speed and stability, and the external focus is on agility and external focus and differentiation. So again, internal focus, speed and stability, external focus, agility, and external focus and differentiation. And then we have our 4 quadrants again: startup, agile, trapped, and bureaucratic. So let's take a deeper dive into this. So we're going to start with those heartbeats, the startup, agile, bureaucratic, and trap. So let's starting with the speed index, the orange here. We're going to start here on the axis. So you're going to move from bureaucratic, slow here at the bottom to fast at the top. So if you're more slow, you're going to be more bureaucratic. If you're fast, you're going to be, let's get it done, very fast. Okay. And then on the blue, the stability and control. So we're here on the bottom. So you can be efficient and bureaucratic to collaborative and planned. So you're over here, and you're in this, you're going to be closely monitored, controlled versus we are all one. So you're going to be very monitored here, and you're going to be much more we are all one type of approach there, very collaborative. On the second y-axis, you have agility from weak, which will find you in the trapped region, or very strong, which is going to be where you're at the agile. And in this, you're going again from constricted, aligned, and strong, agile heartbeat. And just to be clear, before we move on too far, is that there's no right or wrong. It's just who you are. We don't condemn you for being bureaucratic or agile or startup or trapped. It's who you are. It's the personality of your company. We look at it, and it's just the way that you operate. And from our perspective, we're not asking you to change the way you operate. We just want you to understand the pros and cons of how you operate and how do you manage supply chain risk management through having a organization of this mindset. So with that, we'll move on to the last x-axis on the top. So we're moving from that broad area, agile, to the narrow startup, because in startup, you're focused, you're going to bang it out. You can't be too wide. Generally in startup mode, sometimes you move in startup mode, and then once your company is up and running, you may move to a more broad agile mindset. It's hard to be agile and startup at the same time. They kind of oppose. So as you can see here, what we've done, it's a little bit different than what Cameron and Quinn did in their 1999 paper that we certainly appreciate there and give them props for. We look at this as we rearranged the quadrants a bit and added a few things. We feel that this, bureaucratic and agile are opposing. They don't have these quadrants laid out quite the way we do, and startup and trapped are opposing. So that's how we feel from a supply chain risk management perspective, that balance. So it's hard to be strongly bureaucratic and agile. They're almost opposing. Now, we'll get into, can you get all four of these and find a balance? We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So the personas, let's go through the personas next. The personas you have, starting in the left corner here, this bureaucratic, one, and that's where you're very structured, control coordination, efficient stability. That's a bureaucratic organization. Generally slow to decision. Generally a lot of layers of management, relatively speaking. The next on the right is your trap. That's where your more extended company, division, mentoring, nurturing, a collaborative organization. This is we are all one. In general, it follows more the concepts of many of the Japanese companies that are out there. You can look at the bureaucratic as more about pre-2000 companies in the US tend to be more on there, heavy industries. In the upper right is the agile. You can look at these as post-2000 companies. They're very dynamic, entrepreneurial, taking risks, creative, high-tech companies tend to be in this range, but not all of them, of course. But there tends to be this creative orientation about them. And then there's a startup company, which can occur within a division, of a major company where there's kind of more of a hands-off within that division, or a company that is VC, it's very market-based, results-oriented, competing orientation, very focused, trying to grow, and scale. So again, there's no right or wrong, and you can have a combination of these. If you have a big company, what we see is that you may have bureaucratic and startup, you may have agile and startup, or you may have agile and trapped, or and so forth. And we'll get into that. And so what we did is we looked at this, and Greg and I one day, and we said, well, if you turned it like 45 degrees and upended it, it kind of looks like a kite. So that's what drives our next discussion is, what's the shape of your kite? And do you have a single tail, a long tail? Do you have two tails? Maybe that bureaucratic startup, as we mentioned before, or is it a skinny kite? Is it a fat kite? And what we found is when we went through our clients is that the kite actually created a complexion of the company, and it was no right or wrong, but we found that depending on the different type of kites, that some kites, our companies are easier to fly through gusty winds versus steady winds. Right now, I think we have gusty winds out there today with the pandemic. So again, we turned it 45 degrees, and so we created some examples here that Greg and I will chime in together on. And Greg loves to say this: what's the long pole in its tent? What's that dominant persona for you? And again, this is this classic delta diamond design kite that we find. It's the strongest propensity, is rotated at the bottom, as I say. And then we ask ourselves, is it narrow or wide? If it's wide, then you're trying to balance with startup and trapped. But if you're bureaucratic at the bottom of this. And so this is, again, a bureaucratic, hierarchical, internally focused organization. And the leadership is quality focused and has a long-term vision for the organization, as predictable, stable, and structured, clear on rules and formal policies. So Greg, a few words on this.
Yep, you bet. Apologize for the dogs. I'm here with my two puppies by myself, so you may hear them barking. Yeah, we thought it was very interesting, in terms of the shape of the kite. And just to give you a perspective, if you've been on our previous webinars, essentially, this is a critical element when our AI and ML algorithms take all the answers from 5 to 8 different perspectives within a company from executives. This is a driver to essentially say, how fast, what should you do to get started in supply chain risk management, and how fast can you go? So it's very critical in terms of producing what you'll see in a couple minutes, an actual action plan to get the company started. So we really take a hard look, and so do our algorithms, a hard look at what that shape of that kite is, because as Jim said, it's somewhat of your operating culture. So just a quick comment.
Thanks, Greg. So that was the single tail type kite, and then the double tail kite, although it looks a little bit similar, there's a little bit difference between these two graphs that we just saw. And what you see here is startup being almost the same level as bureaucratic. And again, there's nothing wrong with this. And this is an actual customer that went through. And when we thought about it is, well, they have a strong overall base of operations, a very large company, but they have a startup division. They're very startup oriented, where they're always is bringing in startup divisions all the time, new products, new services, and that's really their business model is this overarching company, a very well-known brand, but they also are very focused on new products, sets of new products. So we found it quite interesting that it represented them quite well. Greg?
No, again, it's there is no right or wrong. We want to really make sure that you're aware of that. But it gets very interesting, and we'll show you some actual user feedback from some of our clients. It becomes a very interesting dialogue with the company executives and us relative to them explaining and identifying with the kite. And so we've, just one little digression. At the moment, we have not had I'll say, a difference of opinion between what the tool says about the company's kite culture and the feedback from the client. So very interesting. We've not run into, let's say, where we've had a diametrically opposed feedback from our client representing this particular graph. So yeah, you can do two. You can have two or three, I'll say, dominant threads going on, especially in a large organization with multiple divisions. So
yeah, absolutely. And I did see a question in the chat window about the word trapped or clannish. We struggle with what is the best word that is you could say trapped is a negative word. We could use clannish. I think they're both negative. I don't know if we tried to come up with a better word, but that's where we're at today. We'll continue to look at that. It's not bad to be trapped. It's not bad to operate as a clan. That's nothing wrong with that. But we'll consider that going forward.
Good point.
As we're always looking for better ways.
You bet.
So moving on to the next type of kite. So this is a two-tailed kite, a little bit harder to fly, but can be navigable in calm winds. But when you have lots of gusty winds, you might want to move. Well, before we get to that, I should say we do have one more kite where we have startup as the predominant and bureaucratic, and this is a PE company that we looked at, and here it just kind of flipped from bureaucratic being the dominant to startup being a dominant. So it looks like, a lot of people that in this particular case were from large companies and they're running it as a startup. They're trying to go very fast, but at the same time, a lot of their ways, the direction that they're trying to pull this company is more bureaucratic. Sometimes you get startup and agile, but in this particular case, it's a mindset of startup and bureaucratic. Greg, your thoughts?
It's a good point. I'm actually looking at a question that came in, pretty interesting. Does the shape of the kite flex as you address issues to flatten the W recovery curve? Perhaps it could. It could. What we hope to see going forward with many of our clients who are early on in the 90-day action plan with us is exactly that. As organizations start to exercise a couple of supply chain risk and resiliency action plans, we would certainly hope, not necessarily drive, but hope that the propensity, the operational propensity might be changed a bit. But I think Jim mentioned it. We're not doing this tool. We're not using this tool and leading, guiding, directing, and coaching companies to overtly change their operational propensity. That's not the directive. The directive is to understand what it is so that we can make a company successful and not try to do too much too fast and fall on the sword. So that's my best answer to the question.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough because you're talking about it. If you wanted to change, that would be a change management program. And of course, the CEO would have to be the person driving that change across the organization. And that'd be a change management program. And we're not looking to launch a change management program as part of our 90-day action plan. We're, it is what it is. And we can certainly guide you there. And within our umbrella of services, if that's what you wanted to do, then we can certainly support you in that effort outside of this effort here with the 90-day action plan. But we want to get something going now, and to change the persona of your company, that you can't do that in 90 days. We all know that. That's a much greater effort. So we've done a lot of change management between Greg and I over the years, and that's not the focus here, because that's too much. We understand you have to know and understand this, because when we put together the action items, if you're going to have a lot of distractions in your organizations to launch this program relative to all the other things. So understanding this will help you navigate those complexities in your organization on how to make this 90-day action plan relevant relative to the other major goals that you have in your company, and how does this become one of your top goals of your company. Any other thoughts, Greg?
Nope, I think we move forward.
Yeah, there's one more thought that I have. Now this you got two-tail kites. Now managing a two-tail kite takes a lot more work than a single-tail kite. So you have a lot of competing things going in your company. It's not saying the kite can't fly, it just takes a lot more coordination. It can be done, and a lot of companies do that, and it's fine. But what we found is the most robust kite, you could say, is the box kite. And if you ever flown a box kite, even when you have gusty winds, once you get it up there, it flies pretty well. So you might consider it more representing the most resilient and stable enterprise once you get it up and going. Of course, getting a box kite off the ground is sometimes a bit of work. So that's kind of how we look at companies that are in this. They're generally folks that have been at it for quite a while. In this case, it was that case for this particular client. Again, they have that greater lifting power, and stability. And then the two perspectives, is if you're a smaller box, you may have a tougher time at it in the beginning, but as you expand and you mature, you become a larger box. And that's kind of how we've seen companies grow over time, and even in indoctrinating supply chain risk management. Over time, they become better at it over time in managing the balance between all these four perspectives. Greg?
No, it's interesting with the box kite. This is a pretty this client was a pretty mature organization who has been pretty successful globally, and was demonstrating that they can have multiple threads operating at a very high threshold level constantly. So pretty interesting.
Do we have questions, or are we good to keep going?
I think there's one question. I think we should keep it to the end, because it could provide, we might have a lot of push and pull back and forth. So let's just hold that question to the end.
Okay.
Talking about the definitions of the points. All right.
All right. So again, just as a recap, there is no good or bad. in this. Embrace your shape. Don't get too caught up in, oh, I wish we were here, or we are there, or we really there. And there's going to be, it could be division by division. You're going to see different things, different complexions. You may have multiple personas, as I just said. Again, the supply chain risk manager, the lead of this, has to understand that there's going to be different personas and heartbeats across the company, and it's really their job to manage that. So that person having some change management skills can greatly aid in managing these type of projects. And we all know that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and linking your speed of execution. So again, as we see it, is understanding this will help us understand the speed at which you'll be able to implement the supply chain risk and resiliency roadmap that we'll put together. And we feel it is essential for the success of the supply chain risk and resiliency journey. And with that, again, we don't think there's any good or bad, but we do have a survey here. If you enter in what type of company you think you are, bureaucratic, trapped, agile, startup, maybe bureaucratic, startup, agile, startup, maybe a box kite. If not, you can type in what you think you are in the chat. Again, there's no right or wrong here. We're just trying to, understand, give you a little practice of what you think you are, and what you'll have to navigate in launching a program of supply chain risk and resiliency, which is really across your organization: finance, sourcing, sales, procurement, as I said, manufacturing, shipping, logistics. It's across your organizations, the heartbeat of your company. So it will be interesting to gain your feedback on that. Greg, any additional thoughts?
No, we've tried to give you some rudimentary definitions. I know it might be difficult for you to pick one on the fly, so do the best you can. We'd be interested in it's an opinion, and there's no right or wrong on the opinion. We just thought we'd broach the idea after giving you a couple of rudimentary definitions of what we think operational propensity is.
So we have a few, at least one or two responses now. Bureaucratic startup, which is a very common, when we looked at our survey results from our different folks that have gone through the program. That's if there's something else, please do enter it into the chat. Again, there's no right or wrong. You can just take the last company that you're at. When you think about the heartbeat of your company, is it more bureaucratic? Do you have lots of layers of management? It's difficult to make decisions. Are you more collaborative? That's that open environment. Let's see. Somebody wrote bureaucratic and trapped, have negative connotation. Any other comments there? All right, everybody's a little shy here. That's all right. Maybe it's a lot to take on, but welcome your feedback. With that, Greg, a case study.
Yeah, you bet. Appreciate the opportunity, folks, to at least poll your opinions. And we know it's kind of difficult with rudimentary definitions, but we wanted to give you some perspective and share with you a couple of industrial persona assessment results. And so we thought we'd share with you. This is from a heavy industry client. On the left, we have the supply chain risk and resiliency maturity. This is who you are based on your answers. And essentially this organization ended up in the visibility stage. If you've been with us over the last couple of months, we have a 5-stage maturity model for supply chain risk and resiliency. We position the company essentially as is. The as is positioning is the red icon, their invisibility. And then we also ask a second question in the survey, and that is, where would you like to be? What's your vision? Where would you, if you understand the 5-stage model, where would you like your organization to move to? This one was pretty bold. This vision was all the way on stage 5 in sustainability. So pretty much positioned right in visibility. And again, there's no right or wrong answer, but we have pure definitions, and this organization ended up in visibility. We also did a risk appetite. And so regarding the risk appetite, we have, and if you've been with us, we basically subscribe to 4 basic risk perspectives that a company takes. There's basically only 4. The orange on the right is a maximizer, which is high risk, high reward. The blue are managers, which tend to balance all the risk reward. The green are conservators, who basically are trying to manage the loss. They think of a loss versus a reward. And then the yellow are pragmatists, who wait till the very, 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 very last minute to make a decision on risk, just to get you grounded. This particular organization was essentially in the middle of pragmatist and conservator. And you can see they touch several risk perspectives. Nothing wrong with that. It's just that's where we see them at the moment. And then the third, which is the operational propensity, this particular organization their kite ended up looking like a box kite. We call it clannish, and we'll give you some feedback in a minute. This says they're attempting to do several approaches simultaneously. So we have a few other little persona feedback from this client. And we'll go to the next slide. And under maturity, what this company said to us as we went through the process that Jim profiled, the step-by-step journey, they said this: yeah, we've been focused on SCRM for the past 2 years. That's great. We're still at the beginning of visibility. Okay, they had no problem with that. We're a global company spanning 150 countries. We're pretty darn big. We have a single instance of SAP. Okay, good. We're looking to achieve sustainability, which is our 2B, as soon as possible. So that is kind of a bold vision. When you look at, I'll give you perspective, when you look at where you are today, you're as is in visibility, and you as an organization want to get up to stage 5. Each one of those stages, folks, by history, is 2 years in the making. So that's why I say it's a bold vision. Nothing wrong with having a bold vision. On the risk appetite, here's what they said. Yeah, we're pretty much pragmatists and conservators. We're pretty much risk averse in making decisions. They agreed. They have a new CEO. He wants us to work together across divisions and proactively manage risk, which basically implies they were never doing that. They were siloed. We have secured a sponsor, which is great for funding, and the SCR&R lead. That's good. We're moving to become less risk averse. All right, that's going to take time. We are pretty much reactionary. We agree. And we wait until the last minute, and there's a strong urgency then to change this approach going forward, but it takes time. And then on the operational propensity, what did they say? Well, yeah, we're a box kite. We are pretty bureaucratic. We're looking to change this. Our data is also siloed, which makes it difficult to share and collaborate. So that's kind of a history. We're looking to be more well-rounded, agile. When we have a problem, we are starting to go solve it immediately. We leverage best practices across divisions. So this is a perspective or a feedback that we have received from a client as we walk through the report and the checkpoint calls. So we wanted to share that with you. And then finally, essentially, this is part of the get. We produce an action plan based on the persona recap. They're invisibility, they're pragmatists and conservators, and they're somewhat of a box kite. So we take all that into consideration and produce what we feel is a action plan that has a high probability of success based on the answers to the survey. Now, number one might be, okay, identify all your existing and possible risks for your end-to-end supply chain. And we actually say, keep it small, start with a product line. Our next one could be map the supply chain manually or digitally. That's a very interesting experience because many folks have never done that from end to end, from customers to suppliers. Next is identify your key suppliers from the map exercise and calculate their Altman Z-score. And we'll talk about the Altman Z-score in a minute. Next could be, well, once you identify your risks, you probably should start using some of the basic best practices to assess those risks, because not all risks are the same. Next one, build or subscribe to a risk alert system. There are tools and techniques out there that can do the heavy lifting for you, that actually scan the globe every half hour to an hour and will bring you risk alerts that might impact your supply chain. And the last one on their action plan is maybe you want to think about building and testing a digital twin. A digital twin is taking a supply chain and putting it into a digital model. Why? So that you can start to do what if scenarios and basically see how your supply chain will react. So that finishes up the elements of the actual 90-day tool. I think we'll go into the 90-day plan program. Will finish up strong here and give you basically a sense of what the ask is and what you get. So the ask looks like this. All right. We'd like 5 to 8 executives from your company to fill out the 90 questions. All right. Won't take too long. We ask that the executives be departmental heads or discipline heads in terms of these disciplines: procurement, logistics, end to end through your supply chain, because we want to see and hear different perspectives on risk. All right. And I believe we have we have one more ask, and that is, you might think about getting your executives from the same division or the same product line. We're looking for some homogeneity here in terms of not your entire organization with 62,000 stock keeping units. No, keep it small, take a product line, and then get the execs and the discipline managers for that product line. And that's what we ask. If you do that, what do you get? Again, you get where you are. We showed you the maturity model. You get a sense of who you are relative to your risk appetite and a lot of nuance. We provide that. You also get a sense of how you operate, which is what we focused on today, your operational propensity, again, with nuance in the report. And essentially, you get an aligned 90-day action plan like we demonstrated to you based on who you are, where you are, and how you operate. And we wanted to share that with you. So hopefully you will start to learn how to identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks going forward during this process. And then essentially a bonus is basically, if you provide 5 or more executives to fill in the survey, the consortium will offer you, your company, 1 free pass to our supply chain risk and resiliency online course, which is a value of about $1,400 US. So with that, I think we can move into just finishing up with the benefits as we see them from indoctrinating an SCRM program. We just want to share a couple of compelling reasons to act. One, cost reduction. What we've seen with clients is when you build out a robust supply chain risk and resiliency program, you can actually reduce your insurance premiums on an annual basis. All right, we've seen this. Why? Because you demonstrate to your insurance company that you have a way to identify, assess, mitigate, and manage risks. We've also seen automated workflow that it's improved in terms of better risk management, create a quality, repeatable process. That's what we mean by automated workflow. Next, there's cost avoidance. That is the effectiveness in being able to detect risks and assess them. And the best in class folks are 17 to 20% better than the average at detecting and assessing risks. And in risk management, folks, speed is life. Cost avoidance is you can reduce the cost that you spend on mitigating the risk once you get better and better. All right, so we've seen that happen. Next, working capital. This all comes from good supply chain risk management methodologies. 94% cash flow forecasting, that's 13% better than the average. These are best in class numbers. And essentially what they're saying is, if I can mitigate, identify, assess, and mitigate faster than my nearest competitor, my CFO and finance can develop a more accurate cash flow forecasting. And you can free up cash, essentially anywhere 10 to 30%. That leads us to cash conversion cycle. This has to do with, it's a great measurement of supply chain efficiency and effectiveness and risk management. It involves inventory, receivables, and payables. If you're not using this as a measure of good supply chain performance and risk, please go to Wikipedia and take a look at it. And then the Altman Z-score. This is actually a bankruptcy predicting tool with a 90% accuracy level, predicting potential bankruptcy 12 to 15 months into the future. Who wouldn't want that as a metric and a methodology to evaluate their supply base? Who wouldn't want that? And the reason you do that, folks, is we've come to the conclusion that to change a key supplier that is a critical supplier to your product line, that will cost you $1 to $3 million per changeover. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. We're going to just, we're at the top of the hour, so we're just going to wrap it up here. But thank you for all your questions. If we didn't answer them in this webinar, we will follow up with you personally. We appreciate your feedback and questions. So just to let you know, we have our next webinar coming up on March 22nd. It is available for you to sign up at this time. Even the April 5th webinar is available for you to sign up. So please do sign up for these webinars. If you are interested in learning more about the 90-day action plan, we'll talk more about personas in our next webinar, and we can get into more Q&A on these last two webinars. So thank you again for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time, and we hope you have a great day. Greg, closing comments?
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was a lot to cover, but we get pretty excited about this tool, which takes into account maturity, risk appetite, and your operational propensity. And we're having a great time with it. And we hope to see you all on our next webinar where we talk about the action plans in more detail. So thanks a lot for your participation.